A distant battlefield, long forgotten by the galaxy, was covered in wreckage from an ancient war. Among the twisted metal and shattered hulls, one ship remained mostly intact, its once mighty form now rusting and abandoned. The vessel had been deemed worthless by the alien forces who left it behind, nothing more than a useless relic of a war that no one cared to remember. For years, it had drifted silently, waiting for the void to claim it. But fate had other plans. Jake Carter stood at the edge of the scrapyard, his boots sinking slightly into the dust-covered ground as he gazed up at the colossal wreck. The alien ship was massive, larger than anything humanity had built in recent history, and yet it was discarded like trash. His team of engineers and mechanics had spent weeks clearing a path through the debris just to get close to it. They had salvaged plenty of smaller ships before, but this was different. This was something powerful, something dangerous. Even in its ruined state, it radiated an eerie presence, as if it had a story left to tell. Jake ran a hand over the ship's worn-out hull, feeling the cold metal beneath his fingers. Strange alien markings covered the exterior, symbols from a long-lost empire that had once ruled the stars. Humanity had heard whispers about them. The Zarkilians, an ancient warrior race that had vanished centuries ago. Their technology was feared, their warships legendary. And now, here stood one of their dreadnoughts, abandoned on the edge of human space, waiting to be reborn. "Sir, you need to see this," called out one of Jake's team members, Maya Torres, her voice filled with excitement and disbelief. Jake followed her into the ship's ruined interior, stepping carefully over shattered consoles and exposed wiring. The inside was dark, lifeless, but something about it felt different. Not dead, just asleep. Mia pointed toward a glowing panel on the far side of the bridge, its dim light flickering like a heartbeat. "This thing still has power," Jake muttered, narrowing his eyes. "Not just power," Maya replied. "It has something running in the background. It's like it's waiting for a command." Jake's mind raced. A ship this advanced, still holding on to some remnants of its original systems, meant that it wasn't as broken as they had thought. If they could get it operational, if they could unlock its secrets, then humanity would have something no other species in the galaxy had, a fully functional Zarkilian dreadnought. He turned to his team, his voice steady but filled with something he hadn't felt in years. Anticipation. "Get to work. We're bringing this beast back to life." The work began before the sun even rose over the scrapyard. Jake and his team knew that reviving an alien dreadnought wasn't just another job. It was a challenge unlike anything they had ever faced. The Zarkilian ship was old, its systems outdated compared to modern human technology, yet it was far more advanced than anything humanity had ever built. If they could unlock its secrets, they would be holding a weapon that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Inside the massive ship, the air was stale, heavy with dust, and the scent of burned circuits. Jake led the way through the dimly lit corridors, his flashlight casting long shadows against the alien walls. Strange symbols lined every surface, their meaning lost to time. Some of the markings glowed faintly as if the ship was aware of their presence, but nothing reacted aggressively. Yet, Maya was already at the central control panel, a deep frown on her face as she analyzed the ship's internal systems. "We have power, but barely," she said, her voice echoing through the silent bridge. "This thing is running on emergency reserves. If we want to bring it back fully, we need to find the main reactor and see if it's even salvageable." "How bad is it?" Jake asked, kneeling next to her. "Think of a car that's been sitting in a garage for 500 years without maintenance," Maya replied. "Now imagine that car is the size of a city and runs on technology we barely understand." Jake exhaled sharply. He had expected this to be difficult, but the sheer scale of the problem was overwhelming. The ship was a relic, a masterpiece of engineering lost to time, and here they were, trying to wake it up with nothing but human intuition and guesswork. They split into teams. Ethan, the team's best mechanic, took a group down to the engine bay to inspect the reactor. Maya and Jake stayed on the bridge, working on decoding the ship's control systems. The others spread out, mapping the vessel and making sure there were no hidden dangers waiting for them in the dark. Hours passed. The deeper they explored, the more questions arose. Why had the Zarkelians abandoned this ship? There was no sign of battle damage, no evidence that it had been disabled in combat. It was as if the crew had simply vanished. Then, a discovery changed everything. Jake, Ethan's voice crackled through the radio, urgency in his tone. You need to get down here. Now. Jake and Mia wasted no time, racing through the winding corridors until they reached the reactor chamber. The sight before them sent a chill down their spines. The Zarkelian reactor was not dead. It was hibernating. Strange, pulsing energy flowed through the alien machinery, slow and methodical, like a sleeping beast breathing in its slumber. Symbols glowed faintly on the walls, shifting as if responding to their presence. The ship wasn't just abandoned. It was waiting. Something isn't right, Mia whispered, her eyes scanning the reactor's controls. This thing is alive in ways we don't understand. Jake's mind raced. If this ship had been designed to shut itself down and enter a dormant state, that meant it had a reason. What if the Zarkelians hadn't abandoned it? What if they had sealed it away for a reason humanity couldn't yet comprehend? But it was too late to turn back now. They had already disturbed whatever lay dormant within the ship, and there was no telling what would happen once it fully awakened. Jake clenched his fists, making a decision that would change the fate of humanity forever. Bring it back online. The team worked in silence, their focus razor-sharp as they prepared to bring the alien starship back to life. The massive reactor chamber pulsed with a slow, eerie glow, its intricate alien symbols shifting as if they were aware of the human's presence. The ship had been dormant for centuries, but now it was on the edge of awakening. The only question was, would it accept its new masters or reject them violently? Ethan, the team's best engineer, crouched beside the alien control panel, his hands hovering over the strange, crystalline interface. I've managed to map out some of the power lines, he said, his voice tight with concentration. There are redundancies in the system, which means the ship can reroute power if one area fails. But there's a failsafe here, something I don't understand. Mia knelt beside him, analyzing the shifting symbols. It looks like a security protocol, she murmured. The ship might be testing if we're authorized to use it. Jake crossed his arms, deep in thought. Can we bypass it? Mia hesitated. Maybe. But if we trip something we don't understand, the ship could see us as a threat. A cold silence filled the chamber. Everyone knew what that meant. If the ship still had its automated defenses, it could turn against them in an instant. But there was no going back now. They had come too far. Do it, Jake said. Ethan took a deep breath and activated the power transfer sequence. A low hum filled the chamber as the ancient systems came alive, energy surging through the walls like veins in a sleeping giant. The entire ship seemed to shudder as if stretching after a long sleep. Lights flickered on in the corridors. Holographic displays, once dead, blinked to life, showing streams of alien data. A deep, resonating sound vibrated through the metal, a sound that wasn't mechanical but almost biological. Then the voice came. It wasn't words, not exactly. It was a presence, a feeling that pressed into their minds like an unseen force. The alien technology wasn't just machinery, it was something more, something aware. Mia gasped, gripping the edge of the console. This ship, it's sentient. Jake's breath caught in his throat. If that was true, then they weren't just dealing with an advanced starship. They were dealing with a living entity, one that had been asleep for untold centuries. And now, they had woken it up. The displays shifted, alien symbols rearranging themselves into something more recognizable. The ship was trying to communicate. Identity, unknown. The words formed on the screen, translated by the ship's advanced systems. Confirm, authority. Ethan and Mia exchanged a look. The ship was asking who they were and whether they had the right to command it. Jake stepped forward. "We're humans," he said, his voice steady. "We found you abandoned. We want to bring you back to life." The ship was silent for a long moment. Then, the displays changed again. Zarkelian Command Authority. Not detected. Biological profile. Unrecognized. Directive. Pending. Then, another message appeared, and this one sent a chill down Jake's spine. Final command. Await new master. The meaning was clear. The Zarkelians were gone. Whoever awoke the ship would now be its new master. But before anyone could celebrate, the ship trembled violently. A deep mechanical groan echoed through the corridors. Warning lights flashed, alien sirens blaring in an urgent rhythm. The ship's long-dormant sensors had picked up something outside, something approaching fast. Mia's fingers flew over the control panel, her face pale. "We have incoming ships," she gasped. "Fast, heavily armed. And they're not human." Jake's mind raced. If someone else knew about this ship, that meant they had been watching. And now, they were coming to take it. "Can we get weapons online?" Jake asked urgently. Ethan's hands moved rapidly over the interface. "I'm trying, but the system's still rebooting. We need more time." Time they didn't have. The enemy ships were closing in. If the humans couldn't fully activate the warship in time, they would be sitting ducks. Jake clenched his fists. This ship was theirs now, and he wasn't about to let anyone take it. "Get us battle ready," he growled, "because we're about to see what this monster can really do." The warship trembled as its ancient systems roared back to life, but Jake knew they were running out of time. Outside, the enemy fleet was closing in. Sleek, predatory ships moving like hungry wolves circling a wounded beast. The difference was that this wounded beast was waking up, and once it did, the hunters might find themselves outmatched. Ethan's fingers moved across the glowing alien console, his face tense with concentration. Shields are still offline. Weapons are charging, but we're not fully operational yet. Mita's voice was urgent as she monitored the sensors. "They've deployed smaller strike craft. Fast, maneuverable. If they get too close, they can tear us apart before we're even ready to fire back." Jake clenched his fists, staring at the screen. The enemy had the advantage, for now. But this ship wasn't just any warship. The aliens had abandoned it, thinking it was useless. They had no idea what humans were capable of when given time and a challenge. "We need to buy time," Jake said. "What about movement? Can we lift off?" Ethan grimaced. "The thrusters are sluggish, but we might be able to get her in the air." Jake turned to Mia. "Find us some cover. If we can't fight, we need to make it hard for them to hit us." Mia's eyes scanned the readings. "There's a canyon ridge about 30 kilometers east. If we can get there, we can use the terrain to shield us while we power up weapons." Jake didn't hesitate. "Do it." Ethan activated the controls, and the ship groaned as its long-dead engines roared to life. Dust and debris exploded outward as the massive vessel lifted off the ground for the first time in centuries. It was slow, sluggish, like an old warrior trying to rise after a long slumber, but it was moving. Outside, the enemy ships reacted immediately. They increased speed, spreading out into a tactical formation, preparing to strike. "They're locking onto us," Mia shouted. Before she even finished, the first barrage came. A cluster of plasma rounds slammed into the ship's hull. The impact sent shudders through the structure, making the lights flicker. "Shields still offline," Ethan yelled. Jake braced himself. They were sitting ducks. One good hit to a vital system, and their dream of resurrecting this warship would end before it even began. Another wave of fire streaked toward them. This time, it was worse. Missiles, high-energy pulses, the kind of firepower meant to take out capital ships. The enemy wasn't holding back. "Hold on," Ethan shouted, yanking the controls. The ship responded sluggishly, but moved just enough to avoid a direct hit. The missiles exploded behind them, sending shockwaves that rocked the vessel. Sparks flew from the walls as warning sirens blared. "We can't take many more hits like that," Mia cried. Almost to the canyon, Ethan gritted out, forcing the ship forward. Jake could see it now, a jagged stretch of mountains with a deep ravine cutting through the center. If they could just make it inside, they might be able to use the natural rock formations as a shield. But the enemy wasn't letting up. They surged forward, pressing their attack. Another barrage of plasma fire came streaking toward them. Too much to dodge. Jake's heart pounded. This is it. Then, the warship responded. The moment was almost imperceptible. Just a whisper of change in the hum of the engines, a flicker in the control systems. But then, the entire ship seemed to come alive. Shields activated. The enemy fire slammed into an invisible barrier just before it reached them. Blue energy crackled as the ship's ancient shielding system absorbed the attack. The force of the impact still sent them rocking, but they were no longer defenseless. "Yes," Ethan shouted. "Shields are up. We're still in this fight." Jake didn't waste a second. "What about weapons?" Ethan checked the systems. "Still charging." "Wait." His eyes widened. "Weapons online. And we've got something big." Jake's pulse quickened. "Define big." Ethan swallowed. "This ship has a main cannon that, according to these readings, has enough power to level a city." Mia let out a breath. No wonder the aliens abandoned it. If they couldn't control it, they must have been terrified of what it could do. Jake's jaw tightened. The enemy fleet had been relentless, believing the humans were helpless. They had thought this ship was nothing more than a dead relic. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "Lock onto the lead ship," Jake ordered. "And fire." Ethan's fingers moved across the console. Targeting. Locked. A deep resonating hum filled the ship as the main cannon charged. Outside, the enemy ships seemed to hesitate, as if they finally sensed the danger they were in. But it was too late. Firing. Ethan pressed the command. A blinding beam of pure energy erupted from the ship's forward cannon, cutting through the sky like a lance of destruction. The enemy's lead battleship never stood a chance. The blast struck it dead center, and for a split second, the ship glowed white-hot. Then it disintegrated in a massive explosion. The remaining enemy ships scattered in panic. They had expected an easy kill, a helpless target. Instead, they had awakened something that was never meant to be in human hands. Jake watched the enemy fleet pulling back, hesitation in their movements. "They're rethinking their attack," Maya said. Jake smirked. They should be. But he knew this wasn't over. The enemy would be back, and when they returned, they would bring everything they had. The humans had claimed the ship. Now, they had to prove they could keep it. The warship hovered in the deep canyon, its massive frame casting a shadow over the jagged rock formations below. Inside, the crew worked tirelessly to repair systems, monitor enemy movements, and prepare for the inevitable retaliation. The enemy fleet had retreated, for now. But Jake knew they weren't running away. They were regrouping. Mia studied the sensor readings, her face tense. They're holding position just beyond the atmosphere. Looks like they're calling for reinforcements. Ethan let out a low whistle. They just watched us turn one of their biggest warships into space dust. They're not gonna make the same mistake twice. Jake clenched his jaw. Good. Let them come. We're not the same helpless crew they thought they were dealing with. The warship was still not at full strength, but it was no longer the forgotten wreck the aliens had abandoned. The weapons were online, the shields were holding, and the ancient systems were waking up, revealing secrets even the original builders might have long forgotten. Ethan sat at the controls, scanning through the ship's database. This thing is built for war in ways I don't think even the aliens understood. His fingers danced over the console. The main cannon was just the beginning. I found hidden weapons caches, drone launch bays, and some kind of adaptive shielding that can absorb and redirect energy attacks. Jake raised an eyebrow. Redirect? Ethan nodded. Yeah. Instead of just blocking a shot, the shields can store the energy and fire it back like a charged pulse. Mia let out a breath. No wonder they abandoned it. If they lost control of something this advanced, it could turn against them. Jake's eyes darkened. And now, it belongs to us. A sharp beeping interrupted them. Maya's eyes widened. We've got movement. They're coming back. On the main screen, the enemy fleet was descending. But this time, they weren't just sending a few ships. This was an armada. Battleships, cruisers, swarms of fighter craft, all converging toward their position. They're not taking any chances, Ethan muttered. Jake's heart pounded. This was it. The real fight was about to begin. The enemy forces moved in a precise formation, surrounding the canyon from all sides. They weren't firing yet. Instead, a transmission came through, crackling over the ship's long-dormant communication systems. A deep, guttural voice spoke in the alien language, but the ship's translation systems kicked in almost instantly. Human vessel, you are in possession of stolen military property. Surrender immediately, or you will be annihilated. Jake exchanged a glance with Mia and Ethan. He leaned forward, pressing the transmission button. This ship was abandoned, he said coldly. You didn't want it. We fixed it. That makes it ours now. There was a pause before the alien voice responded. You do not understand what you are dealing with. That warship was never meant to be controlled by an inferior species. If you refuse to surrender, we will erase you from existence. Ethan scoffed. Yeah, you might want to check your casualty list. We've already erased one of your ships. Jake didn't wait for a response. He cut the transmission and turned to the crew. They're scared. They know this ship is dangerous, but they still think they can take us out. His eyes burned with determination. Let's show them how wrong they are. Mia nodded sharply. Weapons systems ready. Ethan grinned. Engines stable. Shields at full power. Jake took a deep breath. Then let's take this fight to them. The warship surged forward, rising out of the canyon like a beast awakened from a long slumber. The enemy fleet hesitated for only a moment. Then the battle began. The first barrage of enemy fire streaked toward them. Plasma cannons, missile strikes, energy lances, enough firepower to level a city. But this time, they weren't a helpless target. The ship's adaptive shields activated, absorbing the incoming attacks. Blue energy crackled across the surface as the warship soaked in the firepower, storing it deep within its systems. Then, it fired back. A massive energy pulse shot outward, fueled by the very weapons meant to destroy them. The blast ripped through the nearest enemy battleship, shattering its hull in a blinding explosion. The enemy forces reeled in shock, but they didn't retreat. Instead, they pressed in harder, launching wave after wave of fighter craft. The sky filled with swarming ships, moving in coordinated attack patterns. Ethan grinned as he activated the drone launch bays. Let's see how they like a taste of their own medicine. From the warship's underbelly, a squadron of automated drones burst into action. Small, sleek, and deadly, they shot into the fray, weaving through enemy ranks and returning fire with pinpoint precision. Jake watched the battlefield unfold, his mind racing. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. This was about domination. The enemy had come expecting to wipe them out. But now, they were realizing they had walked into a nightmare of their own making. Mia's voice cut through the chaos. More ships incoming. They're throwing everything at us. Jake's eyes narrowed. Then let's finish this. He turned to Ethan. Prepare the main cannon. Ethan's fingers flew over the controls. Charging now. Just say the word. The enemy flagship loomed ahead, larger than the rest, directing the battle like a predator leading its pack. If they could take it down, the fleet might break apart. Jake pointed at the screen. Target that flagship. Fire everything we've got. The warship's main cannon hummed with power, glowing with raw energy. At the same time, every secondary weapon system locked onto the enemy's command ship. This was it, the final shot that would decide the battle. Jake took a breath. Fire. A storm of destruction erupted from the warship, unleashing its full might. The main cannon's energy blast slammed into the enemy flagship, cutting through its shields like paper. Explosions burst across its hull as secondary weapons tore into its structure. For a moment, the enemy ship tried to hold together. But then, it detonated. A shockwave spread across the battlefield as the flagship was obliterated. The remaining enemy ships hesitated, their formation breaking apart. And then, one by one, they turned and retreated. Silence fell over the battlefield. The war was over. Mia let out a shaky breath. We did it. Ethan leaned back, laughing. We actually did it. Jake stared at the wreckage, his grip tightening. This was just the beginning. They had won the battle. Now, the galaxy would learn to fear the warship they had once discarded. The battlefield was silent now, but the warship remained on high alert. The enemy fleet had retreated, but Jake knew this wasn't over. The aliens had underestimated them once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. Inside the control room, the glow of the holographic display flickered, showing the wreckage left behind. The enemy flagship was nothing more than scattered debris, and smaller vessels drifted, lifeless, in the void of space. The humans had done the impossible. They had taken a forgotten, abandoned starship and turned it into a weapon of terror. Mia leaned over the console, her face still tense. I don't trust it, she muttered. They ran too easily. It wasn't panic. It was strategy. Ethan scoffed, kicking back in his seat. We just blew their command ship into dust. They should be scared. Jake didn't smile. His gut told him something was wrong. No, he said slowly. She's right. They didn't just run. They're regrouping. Mia tapped the sensors. I've been scanning the retreating ships. They aren't just leaving the system. They're moving toward something. A location, not a retreat point. Jake frowned. Where? Mia expanded the star map. A sector of space flickered red, marked as a restricted military zone. Ethan sat up straight. That's their main shipyard. The one they keep hidden from everyone. Jake's mind raced. They're not running away from us. They're calling in something bigger. A deep silence filled the room. Mia turned back to the display, her voice quiet. If they're going there, it means they've got something we haven't seen yet. Something strong enough to turn this battle around. Ethan let out a slow breath. Great, just when I thought we had the upper hand. Jake's jaw tightened. We need to move. The warship had proven itself in battle, but it was still one ship against an entire alien armada. If the enemy was preparing something stronger, they needed to be ready. But there was a problem. The ship's core systems were still recovering from the battle. While the weapons had held up, some of the deeper functions were still locked. The original builders had abandoned the ship before unlocking all of its secrets, and so far, the humans had only scratched the surface. Jake turned to Mia. We need to get into the ship's core systems. There's still something missing. We need more power, more control. Mia nodded, already pulling up the ship's schematics. I'll start decrypting the restricted systems, but it's going to take time. Ethan drummed his fingers on the console. Time we don't have. Jake pushed himself away from the command station. Then we better work fast, because whatever they're planning. He motioned to the red sector on the map. It's coming for us soon. Hours later, deep in the warship's core chamber, Mia wiped the sweat from her forehead. She had been working for hours, breaking through the ship's ancient security locks. The deeper she went, the more she realized just how advanced this warship truly was. It wasn't just a battleship, it was something more. She tapped a final command, and suddenly, the screens flickered to life. Lines of alien code scrolled across the display, translating into something new. A message. Jake leaned forward. What does it say? Mia's voice was barely above a whisper. Final directive activated. Override confirmed. Awaiting commander's orders. Ethan blinked. Wait. Does that mean? Jake's heart pounded. The ship wasn't just some abandoned wreck. It had recognized them. It had chosen them. Mia's fingers trembled as she tapped another command. A new section of the ship's database unlocked, revealing blueprints, schematics, and systems they hadn't even touched yet. And at the center of it all, a weapon. Not just any weapon. Something far beyond anything the enemy could imagine. Mia's eyes widened. This ship, it's not just a warship, it's a planet killer. Ethan sat up, his face pale. You mean, like it could wipe out an entire world? Mia swallowed hard. Yes. And the aliens knew it. She turned to Jake. That's why they abandoned it. It wasn't because it was broken. It was because they were afraid of what it could do. Jake clenched his fists. And now, it's ours. But before they could celebrate, the alarms blared. Mia's hands flew across the controls. Incoming fleet. They're already here. Ethan cursed. How the hell did they move so fast? Jake turned toward the main screen. His heart pounded as he saw the enemy ships emerging from hyperspace. But these weren't just any warships. These were dreadnought-class destroyers. The kind of ships designed to end wars. The kind of ships that could turn entire fleets into nothing but dust. And there were dozens of them. Jake's mouth went dry. This wasn't a battle anymore. This was a final stand. He turned to his crew. Mia, activate every defense system this ship has. Ethan, prepare for combat. We either win this fight. He took a deep breath. Or we go down fighting. The enemy fleet moved into attack formation. And the final battle began. The moment the enemy fleet arrived, the void of space came alive with fire. Hundreds of alien warships spread out, forming an iron wall of destruction. Their dreadnoughts, massive and ancient, moved into position, their weapons charging with a power that could reduce entire planets to rubble. Inside the command center, alarms screamed. The ship's newly unlocked systems were still coming online, but there was no time to wait. The enemy wasn't going to hesitate, and neither could they. Jake gripped the command console. Mia, give me something. Anything. Mia's fingers flew across the interface, accessing the warship's hidden systems. The deeper she dug, the more she realized that this vessel wasn't just powerful. It was something far beyond what they had imagined. This ship, it wasn't just a warship, she whispered. It was a prototype, a final experiment. She turned to Jake, her voice shaking. It has a weapon that was never meant to be used. Jake's heart pounded. How powerful? Mia swallowed. If we fire it, we might not just destroy their fleet. We might rip apart space itself. A heavy silence filled the room. Ethan cursed under his breath. So, what? We push the button and hope we don't break reality. Jake looked at the incoming armada. The enemy wasn't waiting. Their dreadnoughts were charging up their main cannons. The next few moments would decide everything. There was no more time for fear. Jake's voice was cold, steady. Do it. Mia's hands hovered over the controls for just a second. Then, she pressed the command. Deep within the ship, something awoke. A low hum vibrated through the hull, rising in intensity. Energy pulsed through hidden circuits, lighting up ancient pathways that had been dormant for centuries. The ship's engines roared, sending waves of power across the battlefield. And then, the weapon fired. A blinding wave of energy burst from the warship, expanding outward in an instant. It wasn't a beam, it wasn't a missile. It was something else. A force that twisted the varied fabric of space. The first enemy ships didn't explode. They vanished. One by one, the dreadnoughts were ripped apart, their atoms scattered like dust in the wind. The massive enemy fleet, The same fleet that had come to erase humanity was consumed in moments. The battlefield, once filled with the thunder of war, fell silent. Jake stared at the screen, unable to believe what he was seeing. Mia's voice was barely a whisper. "They're gone." Ethan exhaled, sinking back into his chair. Holy hell. The war was over. In a single shot, they had turned the most powerful enemy fleet in the galaxy into nothing more than a memory. But as the crew let out a shaky breath of relief, the ship's systems flickered. Mia's hands flew over the controls. Something's wrong. That blast, it wasn't just a weapon. The ship is reacting to it. Jake's pulse quickened. Reacting how? Mia didn't answer immediately. Then, as more data flooded in, her eyes went wide. "We didn't just fire a weapon," she said, her voice trembling. "We activated something." The warship rumbled. And suddenly, before their eyes, the stars themselves shifted. Jake grabbed the console. What the hell is happening? Mia stared at the readings. "We're moving, but it's not normal movement. It's not hyperspace, it's not warp." She swallowed hard. It's something else. The ship wasn't just moving. It was being pulled. Pulled somewhere far beyond the known galaxy. And then, everything went dark. When the lights came back on, the screens were filled with unknown star systems. Jake turned to Mia. "Where the hell are we?" She scanned the data, but the answer that appeared on the display made her blood run cold. "ERROR. Location unidentified. CQ2GOR unknown. No recognitions found." Ethan exhaled. "Great, so we saved humanity. And now we're lost in some godforsaken part of the universe." Mia didn't answer. She was staring at something else. A transmission. A signal coming from somewhere nearby. Jake's heart pounded. Put it through. The screen flickered. And then, a voice. Not human. Not alien. Something older. Something watching. Something that had been waiting. "Well, suam, travelers. You're never meant to activate that weapon. No, you are in our domain, and your real test begins now." The crew stared at the screen, frozen in place. They had survived the war. But now, they had awakened something far worse. And there was no going back.